Today, we're diving into a fascinating enigma. We're talking about one of the most common and, honestly, one of the most controversial microscopic organisms living inside of us. This tiny creature has a major identity crisis, and we're about to figure out why.
So let's just cut to the chase with the big question, right? What if the world's most common gut parasite isn't actually a villain? I mean, for decades, if a doctor found this thing in your gut, it was considered bad news. But what if that's not the whole story? What if this supposed bad guy is just a quiet neighbor? Or maybe, just maybe, it's even helping.
Okay, so to really get why there's such a huge debate, we have to go back in time. We need to look at this organism's incredibly confusing history. Seriously, for over 100 years, it's been a scientific chameleon.
You can really see our own scientific journey in this timeline. When Blastocystis species was first discovered back in 1911, scientists looked at it and went, oh, that's just a harmless yeast. It took them almost 60 years, until around 1970, to reclassify it as a protozoan parasite. But get this, the story wasn't over. With today's amazing genetic tools, we've figured out it belongs to this really unique group called straminophiles. That makes it a distant relative of things like diatoms and water molds. Yeah, talk about a weird family reunion.
All right, so after all that confusion, let's try to pin down what we actually know about this thing today. Let's unmask this organism. Okay, first things first, a key term, endoparasite. All that means is that it's an organism that lives inside its host. And in this case, Blastocystis species lives strictly inside our intestines. And just to be super clear, we're talking about a protozoan. That means it's a single-celled organism, it's not a worm, it's not a bacterium, it's its own tiny thing.
So, here's its official address in the grand tree of life. It's a eukaryote, which means it has a cell nucleus just like we do. But as you go down the list, you can see it veers off into this really interesting, unique niche in the kingdom Chromista. And this isn't just boring science trivia, you know? Its unique classification is actually a huge clue as to why it behaves so strangely compared to other parasites.
Okay, this next point is absolutely crucial. We can't talk about Blastocystis species like it's just one single thing. Think of it more like a big, diverse family with lots of different branches. Scientists call these branches subtypes, or STs, and it turns out just 4 of them, ST1, 2, 3, and 4, are responsible for like 90 to 95% of all human cases. This genetic variety might just be the key to the whole mystery of why it affects people in such different ways.
And this thing is a master of disguise. Just look at its life cycle. The way it's thought to spread is through this really tough, thick-walled cyst. You swallow it, and once it's inside your gut, it can morph into these other forms. The most common one is the vacuolar form. That's what doctors usually see in stool samples, but it can also become this amoeboid form, which some scientists think might be the one that actually causes symptoms. Honestly, the full picture is still being pieced together, which is exactly what makes this organism so darn interesting.
All right, let's zoom out a bit. Where in the world do we actually find this thing, and how is it traveling around?
When you look at a global map of Blastocystis species, it really tells a tale of two worlds. In developing nations, especially in rural communities, infection rates can be sky high. We're talking 30%, sometimes even up to 100%. But then you look at industrialized nations, and the prevalence is lower, yeah, but still pretty significant, somewhere between 5 and 23%.
And you might be thinking, okay, so this is mainly an issue somewhere else. But nope. Let's take a developed country like the Netherlands. Some hospital studies there have found prevalence rates as high as 34%. That makes Blastocystis species the most common intestinal parasite they detect. It's not just a tourist passing through, it's a full-time resident.
So how is it getting around so easily? Well, it spreads through what's called the fecal-oral route. And that happens in 3 main ways. First, through water, drinking contaminated water from rivers, lakes, you name it. Second, foodborne, so eating raw fruits or veggies that were washed in that contaminated water. And third, through what's called zoonotic contact. That's when it jumps from animals, like pigs, rodents, and birds, over to us.
And all of this brings us right back to the heart of the debate. The central question, is this thing a friend or a foe? Is it a dangerous invader, or is it just a harmless passenger hitching a ride on our gut? This is where things get really interesting, because the scientific community is completely divided. Okay, let's start with the case for pathogen. Exhibit A. It's been linked to a whole laundry list of nasty gut symptoms. We're talking diarrhea, abdominal pain, gas, fatigue, the works.
It's also found way more often in people who have irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS, and in people who are immunocompromised, like those with HIV or cancer. It can cause really severe problems.
And it's not just an association. Scientists are figuring out how it could be doing this damage. This thing has some serious weapons in its arsenal. It can secrete enzymes that literally chew through our gut's main antibody defense. It can also trigger inflammation in our intestinal cells and can even increase what's called intestinal permeability. You might know it as leaky gut, which can lead to diarrhea.
Okay, so that sounds pretty bad, right? Seems like a closed case. But that's not the whole story. Not even close. Now for the other side of the argument, the case for it being a commensal, just a harmless resident. The number one piece of evidence? Tons of people have it and feel perfectly fine, no symptoms whatsoever. But even more than that, some really fascinating studies are starting to link its presence with healthier gut microbiomes, especially in people who eat high-fiber diets. It might even be a sign of a good metabolic profile. I mean, this just completely flips the script on its head.
Okay, so with this totally confusing picture, what happens next? How do we even diagnose it? And once we find it, what are we supposed to do about it?
Well, the traditional way to find it is with microscopy, basically looking at a stool sample under a microscope. But there's a big problem. It's not very sensitive. It's really easy to miss it, or even mistake it for a fat globule or something. The modern gold standard, though, is a PCR test. This is a molecular test that looks for the parasite's actual DNA. It is way more accurate. And the best part, it can tell you which specific subtype you have, which, as we know, could be really important.
And all this uncertainty is why the official advice, like this from the Dutch Working Party on Antibiotic Policy, is really cautious. They basically say, hold on, don't just treat it because you found it. The recommendation is to only consider treatment if a patient has symptoms and, this is key, after you've ruled out everything else that could be causing those symptoms. So the big takeaway is a positive test does not automatically mean you need to take medication. So, where do we go from here? Let's take a quick look at the future of Blastocystis. You know, a story like this is changing all the time. So to make sure this explainer was as current as possible, we compiled it using a Gemini deep search. That let us pull together all the latest clinical and scientific data to give you the most up-to-date picture we could.
And look, the science here is genuinely fascinating. So if you want to do your own deep dive, we've got you covered. We put a detailed list of all the sources and scientific papers we used into a Notebook LM document. You can find the link for that right in the description.
So we end where we began. Is Blastocystis species a marker of disease, or is it a signature of a healthy gut? The answer, it seems, is, well, it's complicated. It probably depends on a whole mix of things: the specific subtype, your own body, and the entire environment inside your gut. It's a puzzle we're still solving. So what do you think? If you found this investigation valuable, do us a favor and subscribe to the channel. And please leave your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear them.